So, first of all, what I did is I created an adjustment layer and placed it on top of all my footage, all the whole movie, and then cut up in different pieces where I wanted the colour to change. So, first of all, this scene, I had an SL Gold Rush LDR filter and set the intensity to 80, and then set the contrast to minus 32.3 so everything stands out more. Then I made the wood, this makes the wood look warmer, so that's more orange, so therefore it looks a bit more menacing and it gives it more of a cinematic feel. Then I maintain continuity by matching up the actor's action in the shot before to the next clip. So for example, when Elliot lifts his head he's sort of looking up. I matched that with the next clip there, as you can see. And then so when he's struggling with his hands, I made sure the clip started off as him struggling, not resting, because otherwise it wouldn't fit as well with the shot before, because we knew he was struggling, and if it was still, it wouldn't make as much sense. Then here I created narrative by having a slow pace at the start, then slowly building pace, becoming more intense. Also by showing them the shots of his hands. Also by showing the shots of his hands allows the audience to know he's tied up. I placed the wind ambience noise over the scene, which makes it all seem more eerie, and without it doesn't create the same atmosphere. Then I faded it out at the end of the scene, so it didn't sound too abrupt when the sound changes from the next scene. Also used some dialogue from this clip over the next two clips, so it makes the scene flow a lot better because there is continuous audio flowing throughout. I placed a cross-dissolve transition on the first clip and made it 3 seconds long, so it slowly builds tension instead of getting straight into the action. Then I made an adjustment layer and placed them above the clips and made it the length of how long I want the transition to be. On the adjustment layer, I placed a Gaussian blur and added a keyframe on the opacity. So at the beginning of the adjustment layer, it was 0, and then in the middle it got to 100, and at the end it went back to 0 again. So it starts off, it slowly fades in, gets more blurry, and then drops back down into a new clip. And then the two clips I did a cross dissolve, so therefore it helps the transition. It seems a lot more smooth and just gives it more of an effect, just so the audience know that it's a flashback rather than just a simple cut. So on the shot where Noah is sitting alone at the cafeteria table, I added a new adjustment layer and put a black and white effect on it, and then keyframe the opacity so it's 100% at the start, then 0%. This was to emphasise that we're going back in time. I made a black video and made an eclipse mask. This meant that when the mask was placed down, it cuts a hole in the black video, allowing us to see the layer beneath. I clicked the invert and then used the feather tool on the adjustment layer above. This is so I can get a vignette sort of effect, and then I can fade it out when I want to by using the opacity and so on. Then on the adjustment layer above, I cut the clip where I wanted it to start, so I could use a completely new colour, and yeah, so I started from a new canvas, as you'd say, and then we'll see. I used the Gold Rush LDR and set the intensity to 80. Use a temperature of minus 7.7, so it gives it a bit more, so it feels a bit more colder and feels more uncomfortable. And then I set the exposure to minus 0.4, contrast to 4.6, highlights to 29.2, and the shadows to 44.6. Here I made sure she hadn't walked too far past him, as in this next shot it would look as if she has gone backwards, or when he hands the paper down, I edit it so the two clips flow well together. For example, the paper is placed down straight away instead of a couple seconds after. Otherwise, it wouldn't have looked like a fluid motion. It would have looked a bit static and a bit out of place. And here I created narrative by adding a voiceover so the audience can understand the importance of this scene and that this is a younger version of Noah. I also kept fading in and out of clips of a clock and test paper to show how time was passing by. Finally, I did an effect where I had younger Noah walking by, then it slowly fades into older Noah. Just to show how he has now grown up, I cut the clip where I wanted the younger Noah to end, and then put the next clip in where older Noah is, and they're roughly at the same spot. So when I did a cross dissolve between the two clips, it looks as if he's really grown up, and we can see the change in height and so on. On the first clip, I added a cafeteria bell So on the first clip I did a cafeteria sound, so like people dropping utensils, people talking and stuff like that, so it feels a bit more realistic. And then I added a bell, and it slowly gets louder. So then until it ends at the very first second of the next clip. Just so it feels a bit more menacing, and I think it's a nice transition between the two clips. Then I use a few J cuts so to make the scene flow a lot better. For instance, clock video starts talking, then we see a video. For example, there's a clock, and then we hear the teacher start talking, and then we see the clip of the teacher talking. So it just feels a bit more real, and I feel like it's video of him talking. The audio leads into the next clip. So then I did it again here and carried the audio over onto the cutaway. Also, this is so the change in sound, e.g. ambience, will feel consistent throughout and not make a cut seem so noticeable. On the first clip, I put a stabilisation effect on the video, so it made the zoom and camera movement backwards appear a lot smoother, because before it was very shaky. The stabilisation effect made it just feel that bit smoother and just a bit more satisfying to watch. So then for the next scene, I didn't use a preset, I just adjusted the temperature to 32.3 and the exposure to minus 0.2 and the contrast to 4.6. And then the highlight to 29.2 and the shadows to 4.6. This gives a warmer feel to the scene. Then I faded the two adjustment layers together from this scene and the scene before, so it didn't seem so much of a change, and then it slowly faded in, and it felt a lot smoother and almost unnoticeable. Then here I cut the clip where he has both hands on the phone. This is so it matched up nicely with the next shot. Then as he lifts his head, I made sure in the next clip that they was roughly in the same place, so therefore I maintain continuity by matching up the actions between each shot. Once again, I've added a voiceover so the audience can understand the next part of the story. Also, I've used long clips so the audience can understand Noah is nervous, and to ask about this girl and how this job for him was a big deal. So I just created narrative by using the shot lengths and durations and so on. Then I added the wind ambient sound effect over the scene because some of my sound was a bit distorted, and the sound effect keeps the audio sounding consistent throughout. I also added a few text message sound effects and typing sound effects to make it seem as if he was actually communicating with someone. I set the audio gain to minus 10 dB so the sound isn't overpowering and just very subtle. Then I added some city traffic sound effects when he was applying for a job, and it makes it seem as if it was very busy because you can see all the cars in the background. So I didn't want to use the wind ambience, otherwise it didn't feel as natural because you could tell there's cars going on around. Finally, I put sound effects of paper being screwed up and thrown in the bin. All this was done to make the scene seem a bit more real. To go from the scene before into this scene, I created a custom transition of the tree. For instance, when I filmed the opening shot of the scene, I made the camera go past a tree. Therefore, in post, it can be used as a transition. I had to create a mask on the clip with the tree in. The mask allows us to see the shot underneath. Then frame by frame, adjust the mask so it follows the tree until it completely fills up the shot. Once that was done, I cut the clip on that frame because there was no longer need for that mask. Finally, I placed the first half of the clip over the last shot so we get this transition. On the text message effect, I went into Adobe Illustrator to create my own text message bubble, then exported it as a transparent background and imported it into Premiere Pro. Then I added a keyframe on the side so it started at 0 and a few frames later it went to 110 and down to 100. This gave the effect that he was sending a text message. For this bit I did the same with the size but keyframes the position so it moves up when he gets a reply. This makes it feel as if the audience feel involved in the conversation. Here I use the same colour correction and settings as above because the scene takes place right after the last scene, so it just feels more natural. If I use a different one, it might not have fitted as well, and I don't think it would have seemed as natural. So I use the same settings. Then first of all, I cut the beginning clip just before Elliot walks too far in frame. This is so I can fit in the next two shots without it seeming that he has gone he's gone backwards or he's too far ahead. Because if I waited too long, Elliot might have been by the tree by the time we see Kieran get up, and he just wouldn't. The length, it wouldn't have matched up if I waited too long to cut the shot. So then here I maintain continuity by starting the clip where he puts something in his pocket. This is so it fits well with the clip before and makes the cutscene smooth. Otherwise, it would look as if we have almost jumped forward in time. Here my audio caught a lot of wind, so I put it all into Adobe Audition and deleted the lowest frequency of sound, which is most of the wind, therefore eliminating that wind from the audio. I also used some of the dialogue from one clip over to another, so the conversation keeps flowing. Here I had to match up the dialogue with the way they spoke, so because at first we could see his lips moving and the dialogue didn't match up, so then I had to just adjust it so it all matched up. Then I adjusted the dB on a few clips so it makes it a bit louder and easier to understand. Here I created narrative by using the two shots so the audience can establish the relationship between the characters. Also I used a few close-ups so it shows what they are doing is discreet. Then I used a voiceover so it makes the audience completely aware of what is happening or what he has got himself into and why he's doing it. At the end of the scene, I added a fade to black transition so it fits well into the next scene because the next scene starts off black, so it all feels smooth. Here I also used the same colour correction settings as most of it was filmed at the same time as the scene before, so I wanted there to be a consistent look throughout the film. Here I maintained continuity by cutting the first clip when they both raised their hands and then started the next clip when their hands are also up roughly in the same position. However, not much to maintain in this scene as there's a lot of quick clips of Noah in different locations. Here I created narrative by having a slow pace shots at the start, but it feels that he's not as professional and he's sort of getting into this, say, lifestyle. Then, and towards the end, they get a lot quicker. This suggests to the audience that Noah was used to what he was doing, and over time it's become more natural to him. Also used a few close-ups which shows how he's trying to be discreet with what he was doing, just like the other guy, like his main drug dealer. Here I used the audio that I recorded on the day because you can hear little details like the bag rustling and so on. So what I did to the audio was to add a little fade between the two audio clips so it doesn't sound too sudden when playing back. I did use one bit of wind ambience that I downloaded because the audio I recorded had too much wind in one part. Here I used the same tree transition as before and did it in the same way. Also I did the same transition but instead with one of the actors. This time the actor crossed the shot only in a couple of frames, so the transition was a lot quicker than before. I did this because if I used a normal cut it might look weird as continuity would not have matched, but the transition shows this has happened a bit after. Here I use an SL Iron NDR filter and set the intensity to 79.6, which gives the shot a very cold, eerie look. Then I set the temperature to 0.3, the exposure to -0.2 to make it that bit darker. Then the contrast to 4.6 to make the structure on the walls pop that bit more. The highlights to 29.2 and the shadows to 4.6. Here I maintain continuity by matching the character's movements from the previous shots. For instance, as he goes to punch Noah here I cut so that his hand is roughly in the same spot as it was before. Then as he is kicking him, I cut where he swings his leg back, and then in the next shot, started the clip where his leg is back and about to go back down. Here I created narrative by using an establishing shot to show the audience where Noah is and that he could be and to show that he could be vulnerable. Then I used a close-up so I could bring attention to the bag and foreshadow what these guys are after. Then throughout the scene I used a quick pace to show how this is an intense point until the end where it's all over, so the pace slows down and it allows the audience to take it all in. Here I used most of the audio I recorded on that day but lowered the dB on some clips as we was underneath a bridge and by some construction and it was very overpowering at some points. So then I downloaded some punching sound effects and like where he's falling to the ground sound effects, just to make it seem that bit more realistic. Yeah. For the part where we see Noah, I used the Fuji F125 Kodak 2393 and I set the intensity to 120 and saturation to 133.1. This brings out more of the colours from the shot. This gives the shot a cold, greyish look, which I feel was effective because he just had everything taken from him and yeah, sort of almost like draining the life out of him. And then when we see Kieran on the other side of the phone call, I didn't use any preset, but set the saturation to 144.9 to bring out some colours, then set the temperature to minus 26.6 to make the shot seem that bit colder. Now set the contrast to 58.7, highlights to minus 27.9, and the shadows to minus 29.2 to make the shot look that tiny bit darker. Not much. There wasn't much to maintain, as after one shot it switches to the other person on the phone. So as long as they're in the same position, when I was filming, it wouldn't have looked out of place because they could have moved as like the other shot took place, if that makes sense. Then here I created narrative by switching to both sides of the conversation so the audience can clearly see what is going on and they feel more involved as they can clearly understand both sides because they're not hearing one side of the conversation all through the phone and they're actually there. Here I overlapped some of the audio so it goes over onto the next clip, then added a high pass effect on the part that overlapped the clip and set it to 1900. So for example, Elliot would be saying something and then I cut that clip short but carry on the audio onto Kieran, the shot where we see Kieran. Then I added the high pass, set it to 1900 Hertz. This gives the effect that the sound is really coming through the phone and makes it seem more realistic because we are hearing exactly what Noah is hearing. No, not Noah, Kieran, what Kieran is hearing. So for here I used a SL Bleach HDR preset and set the intensity to 70. This is so it looks as if the colour is being drained from the shot, which shows how this is serious for Noah and what he has got himself into is draining the life out of him. In this scene it's more of a montage of him cutting the cocaine, so I wasn't too bothered about maintaining continuity because I wanted to show the process of what he was doing. For instance, he has a bag of cocaine in a bowl and then next shot it's all on the table. It's not meant to look as if he's done that. It's just meant to be like a quick little shot of showing what he's doing. It wasn't meant to flow all into one, as if he's doing this continuously into one like fluid movement. Here I created narrative by using the shots with long durations to show the audience how this is a lengthy process, and by also using a load of close-ups so the audience can pay a lot of attention to exactly what he is doing. For the audio here, I used some of the audio I recorded when I was filming and then cut up and used some of the indoor ambience that I recorded on the day. This is because you could hear people talking in the background, so use the ambience that had no one talking in and placed it over this scene. So I cut the audio into 1 to 2 second long audio tracks, played it throughout the scene while overlapping it so the audio sounds consistent throughout. I did take a tiny bit of audio where he's rustling the bags and placed it over the scene just so it feels a bit more realistic, as that sounds you would most likely hear. Then I used a cross dissolve transition to show how the amount of cocaine he had in the bowl has increased over time, therefore making it clear for the audience to see what has happened. When filming, I made sure the bowl stayed in the same place so the transition looks smooth, and as it would only be Noah's hands and the cocaine in the bowl that would be changing. For this bit I used the SL Blue Still preset and set the intensity to 87.2. This is because it gives the shot a cold, dark feel which sets the mood for the scene, as Noah is worrying that what he has or is about to do is very wrong. Here I maintain continuity by cutting the shot when Elliot has both of his hands on his knees and he's more leant forward, so when it cuts to the next shot it fits in well and doesn't look like he's moved backwards or anything. And then also cut the shot where they walk past past and do the deal, and then it cuts to the bird's eye view. I cut it so they just walk past each other, so it's easy for me to match it up with the next shot, which is the bird's eye view shot. Otherwise, if they was a lot further apart, then I cut it to the bird's eye view shot. I might not be able to get the distance correct, and it might have looked funny for the audience. Here I created narrative by using long shots and drawing the viewer's attention to Noah, and the little bag of cocaine by using close-ups and slowly moving the camera in on him. This is because it shows that there is a lot of pressure on him. So all these close-ups and on the bag and Noah I felt created a lot of pressure on him, and therefore created narrative. Here I used the audio I recorded on the day and added in the wind ambience at the end, as it is a lot quieter than the audio just before. So I thought it makes it more dramatic, the scene more dramatic, because it's really loud and it slowly dies down. Because we know Noah has gone through with what he has done. He's completely gone through with it now, and yeah, I played this audio just before the bird's eye view clip started, and then added cross dissolve so it fades in. It seems a lot smoother when playing it back. Otherwise, it would just really loud audio, then it would cut and it would be a lot quieter and it wouldn't sound that smooth, and it could catch all the audience off guard. Finally, on the first shot, I created my own pull focus. To do this, I keyframed the sharpness and set it to -100, then went forward a few frames and set it back to 100, making it seem as if the focus was being pulled onto Noah. Here I use the SL Bleach NDR preset and set the intensity to 120.7. This is because it gives the shot a lot darker look and sets the tone for the scene, as we know the guy's dead and how it all happened. On the last shot I used another black and white adjustment layer and created my vignette just like the beginning in the flashback, just to show how this is the end of the flashback. I used exactly the same as I did when I did the very first flashbacks. It shows that this is the beginning and the end of it all, and I felt it was just more effective, because if I changed it, it would have, the audience might not have known, and it might not have been as clear. Here there wasn't much to maintain, because I was only showing short clips around the room to show exactly what led to his death, and that Noah had something to do with it. And as he was never moving, there wasn't much to maintain. The only thing I did maintain was when Louis, we see a shot of the father, and he was holding his phone with one hand. I made sure I used the clip where he was holding it with one hand, and then cut to the next shot where he's still holding it with the phone with one hand. Here I created narrative by using close-ups so the audience can interpret themselves what has happened, and then use a low-angle shot so the audience can see the father is angry. Then a shot of the phone which explains to us why he's angry and how he knows who has done this. Here I used some more of the indoor ambience I recorded and placed it over this scene. Finally, I slowed down the last shot to 70%. To 70% of its speed, which gives the audience more time to look at what is on the screen, the phone screen. Here I used the same preset and set colour settings as I did at the very beginning of the movie or the film, because nothing would have changed, as the flashback didn't take up any time, and it's just so we can see what happened. So this scene takes place straight after the beginning scene. And then when Elliot breaks, I maintain continuity by this. So when Elliot breaks from the duct tape, he has his hands out quite wide. So when I put the next clip in, I made sure his hands were also out quite wide. Then on the last shot, I edited it so he still has his hands on the door, as he would never have taken them off, because we constantly see the door shaking. So I made sure he always had his hands on, then he took them off, and then we can see the final reveal. Here I created narrative by using quick pace shots to show how Noah's getting somewhere and breaking free, then slowing it down to show how he has another problem, then finally leaving it on a cliffhanger for the audience to decide what happens next. For the sound, I played all the audio I recorded on that day, so we could hear all the footsteps banging on the door, etc. Then place the wind ambience over the top to create that eerie feel / atmosphere. Finally, I copied and pasted the adjustment layers from the beginning flashback over to this M1, so I could get the exact same effect as before, and then the audience are aware of the transition from past to present. And finally, the last thing I did was add another adjustment layer over the top of the whole footage or the film, then added a crop effect onto that adjustment layer, and edited the top and bottom bars by 10%, therefore giving us that letterbox effect and making the film seem more cinematic. So yeah, that's my film.